Smartest Person Existive, aka Alive, 2014, part 3 of 5. 285,000 people have been chemically synthesized since we last viewed this screen. 10 down, 15 to go. Coming in at number 15 is Philip Ball, English chemist, physicist, and general intellectual on everything and anything that has to do with the interface of science and culture. For those of you who don't know Philip Ball, everyone for sure knows Malcolm Gladwell. When Amazon formed in about 2000, their sales started to decline and bookstores started to close. And during that decade, Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point was the highest selling book. Compared to Gladwell, Philip Ball is like Malcolm Gladwell on NZT 48. After getting his BS in chemistry at Oxford, he went on and got his PhD in physics. Then he became a senior editor at Nature. And then in 2001 he started lecturing at the London School of Economics on the physics of society. And in 2004 he published his Critical Mass, which has become a modern-day classic in the field of social physics. He's touched on the origin of life problem in his book, The Unnatural, which we talked about in the first video. And he writes generally on the why society is a complex matter. Most books you can go through in a day to a week, or maybe 2 weeks, and usually done with them, like Gladwell's The Tipping Point. But Ball's Critical Mass is so rich with information that you can't get through the book in one sitting, or even possibly in 1 year. The only person I can compare Ball to is in intellectual density in regards to the history of social physics and social chemistry is Petram Sorokin. He founded the Harvard Sociology Department, and his 1928 chapter on the history of social mechanics, social physics, social chemistry, and social thermodynamics is the apex of American sociology, and it's pretty much went downhill from there. But Ball is starting to bring it back. So let's take a look at a clip of him talking about experiments.
One of the things I'm going to be talking about tonight is actually the value of little experiments. So, you know, it's tempting with that sort of brief to say, I'm going to figure out what dark energy is or something. You know, I mean, I wouldn't even know how to begin to answer that question, and I think it's a fantastic question. But I think that a lot of the experiments that I find most appealing are ones that you do on a benchtop, often with stuff that's just homemade, that's cheap. And, you know, we tend to think, because we have these big experiments, that you know, that's the way science works now. But I think a lot of the most fascinating science, and certainly some of the most curious science, so when people can just sort of follow their nose, that comes from experiments where you're free to do that because you've made your own equipment. It costs next to nothing. But what I would advocate is that for a lot of curiosity-driven research is that a fantastic way to do it is on the cheap, because there's still loads of questions that we can ask. Ones that, you know, you don't even know what's going to happen. You set something up and you find something weird that comes out of it. And, you know, if you're doing it at that scale, you can just follow your nose. Whereas if you're planning the LHC, then you have to have it planned 10 years in advance, and you've all decided what questions you're going to ask.
Coming in at number 14 is Russian mathematician Grigori Perelman, a 2010 Smartest Man in the World candidate, famous for his work in Riemannian geometry and topology. In 2006, after solving the Poincare conjecture, he declined $1 million in the Fields Medal because, as he put it, "I'm not interested in money or fame. I don't want to be on display like an animal in a zoo." To give some background, in 2000, the Clay Mathematics Institute picked out the 7 hardest problems in mathematics and offered up $1 million apiece to anyone who could solve any one of these problems. In 2003, Perelman solved the Poincare conjecture. The Institute offered him the $1 million and the Fields Medal. He turned it down, stating that if the proof is correct, then no other recognition is needed. That's a straight G move right there.
A Fields Medal is awarded to Grigori Perelman from St. Petersburg. For his contributions to geometry and his revolutionary insights into the analytical and geometric structure of the Ricci flow. I regret that Dr. Perelman has declined to accept the medal.
Можете просто то, что вы сказали. 14 рублей 14. нас отправили сюда за вами.
A Fields Medal is awarded to Terence Tower of the Department of Mathematics at the University of California at Los Angeles for his contributions to partial differential equations, combinatorics, harmonic analysis, and additive number theory.
So we just saw Tao, number 16, accepting the award that Perelman, number 14, turned down. Tao won because of his work in part on partial differential equations. And to bring this all back together to the countdown, as we saw Kaufman, number 22, talking about the two cultures, this is a prime example. The different branches of study in university educational system are so fragmented, there's no connection to it all. So, to understand why people chemically react together, you have to understand partial differential equations. Specifically, partial differential equations of isothermal isobaric systems, which is what societies are, which means you have to understand chemical thermodynamics. The problem is, there's no connection between the mathematics department and, say, the sociology department. So, right now, I have no idea where the Euler-reciprocity relationship comes from. My suggestion is to help bring us all together in the form of one culture, society, and intellectual community. If you're the head of a mathematics department, go down and grab the head of the economics department and the head of the sociology department, and the three of you go down to whoever teaches chemical thermodynamics, either in the chemical engineering department or the physical chemistry department, and sit down at a round table and talk to each other with how we can bring about a unified course that teaches chemical thermodynamics applied to society, like Pareto talked about in the first part of the 20th century, and like Rosini talked about in the end of the 20th century. One last thing about whether or not to accept a prize. There's an anecdote that goes back to 1933 when Paul Dirac was about to win his Nobel Prize for his work on applying relativity theory to the electron and predicting the antiparticle. He was a little bit nervous about the public attention he was going to get, and he was thinking about refusing the prize. Ernest Rutherford told him, he said, if you refuse, you'll get more publicity. And that advice seems to be proved true with Perelman, who we saw being hounded in the grocery store by people videotaping him. Coming in at number 13 is American David Hwang. He has a social Newton ranking of 15. He's the 30th most liked page in HMOpedia, and he has a citation rank of 53. In 2001, after studying biochemistry at Oxford, he penned his famous The Thermodynamics of Love. Hwang outlined how relationship formations and breakups can be modeled as chemical thermodynamic reactions, the bond structures of which being measurable by enthalpic and entropic energies, according to which relationship formations can be seen as chemical reactions going through activation energy barrier and forming into stable products. He states, if a given male-female reaction has a very negative free energy change, shown here, then it is expected that the couple will spend most of its time together as a strong couple. Remember, the first person cited with an IQ of 225, German polyintellect Johann Goethe, the person to whom Einstein looked up to as an intellectual mentor, did this derivation 200 years ago, and he said it was his greatest work. The problem is, we become so inundated with secularism and superficiality that we no longer have a connection to reality, and which is why Hwang considers this something as a fun he did when he was a kid. He's now, after graduating from Harvard Medical School in 2006, an assistant professor of neurology and a staff neurointensivist at Yale Medical School. Coming in at number 12, we have Roger Penrose. an English mathematical physicist, best known for his 1989 The Emperor's New Mind concerning computers' minds and the laws of physics, wherein he states his view that he thinks that each individual person is a tiny configuration of entropy, which is close to target. And in his more recent The Road to Reality, gives his view that he thinks the second law of thermodynamics at the particle physics level states that the entropy per baryon of the universe tends to increase with time.
There is a current view that consciousness is something which arises from some complicated computation. So we have our computers, and people think that because they can do things amazingly fast and they can calculate very quickly and they can play chess extremely well, that they're superior to us even, and that it's only that some complicated aspect of this computational activity, somehow consciousness arises from that. Now my view is quite different from this. I think there is a lot of computational activity going on in the brain, but this is basically unconscious. So consciousness seems to me to be something quite different. What we do when we understand something is not computing. There's something else going on. But at the same time, I'm a great believer in science, and that what's going on in our heads is still obeying the same laws that are going on in the universe outside us. When I wrote my book, The Emperor's New Mind, I was trying to develop this idea, and I was trying to say, well, there is something else out there. What could it be? Where is the biggest gap in our understanding of physics? There are lots of gaps in, we don't know what governs the masses of particles. We don't know all sorts of detailed things. But most of these things don't have a direct bearing on what a brain does. I mean, it's the wrong scale. There is a big gap in our understanding of the laws, and this big gap is within present-day quantum mechanics. There are two procedures in quantum mechanics, the Schrödinger equation and the making of the measurement, and they're inconsistent.
At number 11 is American business mogul Warren Buffett. After watching his father's business fall during the Great Depression, he started reading books on business, and by the time he had entered the Wharton Business School at age 17, he had read 100 books and found that he knew more than the professors. And from 1965 to 2005, simply by memorizing the financial sheets of the world's leading companies, he produced an annual average return of 21.5%, a feat unsurpassed to this day. He's currently, along with Bill Gates, one of the world's top 5 wealthiest persons.
Coca-Cola went public in, I think it was 1919. Stock sold for $40 a share. It went back before that as the Candler family, and they went back. They bought it for $2,000, the whole business. Asa Candler back in the late 1880s in a couple of purchases. So now he goes public in 1919, $40 a share. 1 year later, it's selling for $19, gone down 50% in 1 year. Now you might think that's some kind of disaster, and you might think that sugar prices increased and the bottlers were rebellious and a whole bunch of things. You could always find a few reasons why that wasn't the ideal moment to buy it. Years later, you'd have seen the Great Depression, and you'd have seen World War II, and you'd seen sugar rationing, and you'd seen thermonuclear weapons, and the whole thing. There's always a reason. But in the end, if you bought one share for $40 and reinvested the dividends, it'd be worth about $5 million now. And that factor so overrides anything else. I mean, if you're right about the business, you'll make a lot of money.